is Nikki from Little Blue Artworks and welcome to the Needle Felt, a blue whale tutorial. Here I'm going to be starting out with my needle felting pad and my 3 needle felting needles. This is my large needle, which is color coded in green. This is also a gauge 32. And then my medium sized needle, which is a gauge 36, color coded with pink. And then my red needle, which is my small, color coded with red. This is a size 38. Here I have around about 25 grams of core wool, which is more than enough to make our whale with. And I'm just going to put some of this aside. This will be for the tail and for the fins. So I'm just going to take off a little bit less than a quarter. Around about this much should be more than enough to make a couple of fins and a tail at the end of the first part of the project. And for the rest, this is where we're going to make the body of the whale. So on my desk here, I'm just going to make a long sausage shape with my core wool, just by pulling it in together into a very rough, round, long shape like so. And then I'm going to begin felting this on my mat. And I'm going to start out with my large needle, which is the green needle. This is a gauge 32. And I'm just going to start pushing through some of the fibres with my large needle. If you've never needle felted before, the process here is working by the sharp needle going through the fibres, and then the needle and the table is protected by the mat, so you're able to stab that without the needle breaking or marking your table. But on each side of this triangular, very sharp needle are some very small barbs. There's 3 barbs on each side of the triangle. They're all facing down towards that sharp point. And as you're pushing down through the fibres, those little hooks are holding onto the fibres and then felting and matting them together. And this is the felting process. So the more you felt the fibres, the smaller and denser that structure will become. And you always start by making some basic shapes. And with my kits, we always do start with core wool because it's a rough wool and it's fast to felt with. So we make the shape first and then we colour it afterwards. So now I've felted this part, it's begun to hold the fibres together. So I'm just going to take that off my mat and turn it slightly, pushing it down again in together and holding it on my mat. I'm going to start pushing or stabbing through, being very careful of your fingers to get those fibres matting together. And I'm going to continue to do this all the way around until that sausage shape is then holding. And I'll speed this part up. That middle part felted, that's becoming nice and rounded and cylinder shape right there in the middle, but obviously need to felt all over this whole area of the wool, and it's going to taper down at either side. One side will be its nose and the other side will taper down and then become its tail. So I'm going to continue felting and turning, felting and turning, and I'm always going to keep in mind that the ends are going to be slightly smaller than the middle, so it will taper off into that whale-like shape that we're after. So you want more wool coming in to the middle of the structure than you do at the ends. But continue stabbing this, and you can stab down the way into your mat, or you can stab a little bit inward this way here. And I will speed this up, and hopefully you will see by the end of this the general structure of the whale that we're going to be aiming for. I get to the end of this side of the shape, I'm going to start felting in a little bit this way as well as down, because I don't want this to become too thin and too small towards the end. You also will find me in my tutorials sometimes felting with 2 needles at a time. This is just something I do to speed up my own process. It's not something I recommend, but if you have a pen tool or something similar that holds more than 1 needle, that will also speed up your process as well. But I'll continue felting this way and then also in this way, so that this part becomes not too thin for it to be either the nose or the tail of the whale. And just point out that the first part I felted here has tapered fairly gradually and smoothly towards quite a fine point. So I'm going to decide that this is going to be the tail end of my whale. And I'm going to have the other side be slightly more wide at the end and rounder. And this will be more like the nose or the mouth of the whale. So I'm just going to hold that in the sort of shape that I want. You don't want it coming all the way over here because that will be too thin. So I'm just going to bundle up those fibres to a point where I feel like, okay, that's going to be thick enough there to felt into a bit more of a rounded shape for the nose and the mouth of the whale. Of course, you can sculpt that shape a bit more elongated after you've got your fibres holding together. But I'll speed this part up and you can see by the end of it what you're aiming for. So now we've got all the fibres holding together at both ends. This part has still got a lot of felting to be done and needed felted into the right shape for the nose. Over here it's nice and firm, and in the middle it's nice and firm, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to continue sculpting this side, which will be the nose of the whale, so that not only is it nice and firm, but it's coming a bit more thinner towards the end of the nose and a lot more firmer of a piece of felt to work on for when we're colouring it and sculpting in the details of the eyes and the nose and the mouth there. So I'll continue felting that down so we have something a bit more firm and a bit more tapered coming in for that mouth area. I've got my structure really nicely firmly felted all the way along. This is definitely going to be, as it's the smaller end, the tail of the whale, and this part the nose. So with this part I made sure not just to felt down into a long tapered thin part, but also in this way just to round off the nose area a little bit. Also for the structure of the whale, I made sure to do some really deep stabbing right in the middle to make sure the fibres in the middle of that structure are holding really well and nicely together. And then I go over the surface with shorter stabs, and this just makes the surface of the whale a little less bumpy to work with. And if you find patches need a little bit of extra wool, like because you have a dip or so on, you can just pull off a little bit of that extra core wool that you have, and then just fill that dent up so you have a little bit more of a smoother surface. The look of the surface of the wool is not that important because you will be covering this up with a colour. And when you're repairing an area, you are just tapping that on the surface and not stabbing all the way down through. It's just to connect those fibres in there. But we are generally looking for a nice smooth line all the way around. So if you see any part that's really dipping down, you might want to just add a little bit of excess wool to that area. Or if there's any part that's particularly thin, then you might want to also add a little bit of wool to that area. And again, you're just tapping that on the surface to connect those fibres down and smooth the area so the outline of that shape is really nice and clean. So you're always turning as you go to make sure it's got a nice cylinder all the way around. And again, one side is slightly smaller and thinner than the other side. And this side here being the larger side will be the mouth area and this will be the tail. So now we're going to work on the fins and the actual tail of the whale in the next part. So putting aside the body of the whale, we have the rest of our core wool here. So I'm just going to divide this into half, roughly. That one half I'm going to pop aside, that's going to be the tail of the whale. And then these two parts here are going to be the fins. So I'm going to half that once more, trying to get roughly the same amount of wool for each fin. So I'll pop that one aside here, and I'm going to start with this shape. And what we're going for here is an almond shape. So I'm going to continue with my one needle here. This is again the large needle. You can also go down to a medium needle if that feels better for you. It will be slightly easier to work with, but it'll take that little bit longer. So go between your large and your medium here and just seeing what's feeling best and how it's working for you. So what I'm going to do, instead of just going in and felting this rough piece of wool, is just fold in the edges, just so I know I've got some edges there to begin working my almond shape. So that's going to be the outer edges of my fin, which I'm going to begin tapping through. You can hear that going all the way through the fibres into the pad. And just a few times there will actually just hold that down on the pad for me. And you can see if that sort of width is going to work for your whale. So just to give you an idea here, my whale is, and this is really not something you need to do, but it's just in case you're curious, the sizes I'm working with. I've made mine around just over 8 inches long. Okay, so that's about 21 centimeters. And at the moment, again, I'm just feeling it out and eyeballing the whole thing. I'm not measuring this to a T, but the width there is around about 2 inches, which is 5 centimeters. So again, I'm just giving it a guess there, and we've got about 1.5 inches in the width there of the fin, which is just under 4 centimeters. And I'm probably going to do it at around about 3 inches in length, which is just under 8 centimeters. 7.5 centimeters. So that's what I'm kind of aiming for. But again, I'm just going to feel it out because you can really just adjust the sizes as you go. So what I'm going to do here is felt this all down into my almond shape. Although one side, it only needs to be one side in the almond shape. The other side can just remain fluffy, as this will be attached to the body of the whale. So I can leave that fluffy to help that attach. This side, however, will come into an almond shape. So I'm really just going to pull those fibres in together, folding in the sides to try and felt that into that shape. And it's okay just to let it stick a little bit to the pad, not too much, don't over felt it, or you'll be struggling to take it off your pad. And that's that coming in a little bit there. Now I've got these excess fibres there. You can either cut that off, pull it off, or you can just try and manipulate them to come back along this way and into a point by squeezing those fibres together at the end. And if I hold down that shape there, I've got a little bit of a point happening, a rounded point, and I'm just going to push that needle through those fibres to start getting them to attach. in that shape, and it's very rough at this point. You don't need it to be anything perfect. So now I'm just giving it a rough felt all over to get a general shape of a fin. And before I go any further, I'm going to take that off my mat because it will be sticking at this point to my mat. And you can see the fibre is really stuck down to the mat there. So taking that off every now and again will help. Now I'm just going to hold it and go over it again, still with my large needle here. And I'm going to come in here because it's a little bit bulky at the end. So I'm going to felt it not just down, but in this way. And that's just sculpting that part down and into the point that I'm looking for. Then I'm going to come in this side as well, being careful of your fingers. And if you want to just work the line of that fin, you just pull in the fibres with your thumb or your finger and then felt down on that patch that you've just pulled in. And then you really want to flatten it out. So you're going to give it a really good felting all over once you've got that shape sorted. At this point I do want to pull it off one more time. Okay, so I've pulled that off. Just going to felt down to become a little bit more flat at this point. Have stabbed that to death on my mat, so it's nice and flat this side, but when I peel it off it will be all fluffy on the other side. Here we go. So I'm going to give that a gentle just tapping all over this side just to bring those little fluffy fibres down and make it a little bit smoother to work on. And then I'm just puckering or pinching in this side of the fin just to bring it in as I'm felting it and shaping it into that fin-like structure. I'm going to have a look at this on my whale and see how it's looking. So I'm remembering the bigger side, or slightly bigger, is the nose. And it's going to have this fin coming down this sort of way. And that looks quite good to me. So what I'm going to do is use my other piece of felt, which should be the same size, to then duplicate this fin in exactly the same way. And hopefully we end up with something similar. It won't be identical because we're not machines. So I'll just fast forward to the next part where we end up with the same fin again. Okay, so now we've got two of our whale fins around about the same shape and size. And again, just testing them on the sides of the whale just to see how that will look, but we're not attaching them on yet. They seem to come off a good size. You can make them shorter by attaching them on at a place that's closer to the tip of the fin, or you can make them longer by attaching them on at the bottom where the fibres are looser under the fin. If you have a picture of a real whale on your phone or on your laptop for reference, this always helps to get the sizing right. But you can adjust the size by attaching it where you need to, but it'll be round about in the middle and on either side of the whale like so. But to finish off our core structure, we're going to be working on the tail, which is the last part. And we're going to be taking the core wool again to make this tail. If you find it's a bit lumpy, you can always just do a little bit of carding by pulling the fibres apart, stretching out any knots, making it that little bit more fluffy texture to work with rather than bitty or knotty. You do this just by pulling the fibres apart between your thumbs and fingers and then restacking them on that first area there. And this will just brush out any lumpy bits, giving you something finer to work with. Now I've still got rather a lot of core fibre here, so I might not need all that much. Now I've kind of fluffed it up a little bit, I can see that I do have rather a lot. But we'll work with it and see what happens. So I'm just going to pop that on my felting mat, and I'm going to make a line this way along the top of my felting mat by folding the fibres in towards myself. So I'm just going to pat that down to make a flat area first. Then I'm going to fold those fibres in here. This will make a nice line. This will be the very end of the tail of the whale. And I want this part right in the middle to come in a bit, so I'm just pulling those fibres in a slightly more while keeping these parts a little bit more pushed up. So it's going to come down into that V shape there. And the fibres will start holding together once I start pushing through just over the end of that fold there with my needle. A few stabs and they will begin to hold. I'm being very careful not to stab my fingers here, and I'm not coming up too much when I'm stabbing. I'm really just holding the needle close and just pushing it through. You don't really have to stab it too much. Just making sure that this part's coming in. You could even stab in this way a little bit to make that middle part come in, and then this part coming up there. So I'm just pushing those fibres up a little bit and using the needle to then push down to make that V shape happen. Same on this side. You can always take parts of the wool there. If you spin them around, then they kind of hook onto the needle a little bit, and then you can push that down into an area that you find a little bit thin and needing of thickening up, or just pushing the fibres up into that area to make it nice and thick, so you've got a nice piece of felt to work on. So I'm just pushing that so it comes into that rounded half tail over this side. And then the same on this side. So I'm just pushing the fibres where I want them to go and then felting them down to make that V shape happen. It's a very smooth V shape. It doesn't come in too deep, but it's beginning to get that shape happening there. So now I've got that nice sort of rounded V shape happening. I'm just going to make sure it doesn't stick too much to my pad by taking it off, and it is fairly stuck at this point. I've got a little bit of loose felt there, so I'm just going to pull that off because we've got rather a lot. So any bit of loose felt, I'll just get rid of that for the moment. We can always add that back on if needed. And I'm going to now try and shape the points of each side of the tail. This side seems to have a bit more wool than the other side, so I'm just going to pull off a little bit just so we've got a similar amount of wool on each side, and we can always add on more to that side if we need. So I've got that nice V shape happening. I'm just going to go over that once more. You can do this either with your large needle or your medium needle. It is easier with your medium needle, but it will take that little bit longer. Just going over that edge and then flattening down just underneath it, because this will be a flat piece of felt. And it's not perfect, I need to add a little bit there, but I'll do that after. So now I'm going to fold in this side here. I'm going to push my finger down, pointing towards the outer corner of this part of the tail, and then fold that over my finger. Take my finger out and down. And this will give me another nice edge to felt down there. Now it had rather a lot of wool, so I'm just going to pull a little bit off. Don't need all of that, or you can use your scissors if it's not pulling off easily. Just so it's not too thick. And remember, we are adding on colour as well. So now I'm going to felt those fibres down. And you can see a very, very vague tail shape happening on that side. This part needs to come in a little bit, I feel, so I'm just going to hold that in this way, push it in, and then felt that down. So all you're really doing is pushing the fibres and holding them in the position you want, and then felting them to lock the fibres in that shape that you're going for. So that's one side of the tail there, done. I don't want to over felt because it will stick. Again, this side has got quite a lot of fibres that I probably won't need. We can always add more if we want to. And I'm just turning the pad because for myself this is easier for me. So I'm just then going to fold them over my thumbs just because this is the left side, so it's just easier for me. Holding those fibres down so that the thickness of this part is similar to the thickness of this part, and then just pushing the fibres down And then this part I don't want to be shorter than over here, so I'm just going to make sure to pull them around about a similar length of this one, holding them on the mat there and then pushing them down. So you really are just sculpting and moulding those fibres into position on your mat, and your mat will hold them as well because that's made of fibres too. I want to push in a little bit this area, so I'm just going to push that with my finger and then felt to hold it in that position. Now I've got that really rough shape of the tail. I'm just going to give it a good stab all over, but I'm going to not go all the way through the tail into the mat because that is really just going to ask for trouble and break the fibres of my mat as I peel that off. So I'm just giving it a little bit of a tap all over. That should be enough to hold it, enough for me to take off and make sure it's not sticking too much to my mat. And then on either side, I then can continue to felt that. If you have a pair of sharp scissors, you can go around the outside of this and just neaten that up to the exact shape that you're going for. But we're going to just have a look at this on our whale now and just see how that's looking. The fluffy fibres there, I'm just going to leave fluffy because that's going to help attach that to the body of the whale. And for me that's looking quite good. And we've got a bit of a tail and our fins going on there. So it's definitely recognisable, at least, as a whale. And what we're going to do next is move on to our colours. Okay folks, so now we're going to move on to adding some colour to our blue whale. So I have my fins and my tail here and my body on my mat. Now because the underside of the whale is actually just going to remain this colour, I'm going to choose which is the smoothest side for me to keep on the bottom. So up here I feel is not really that smooth, this is that tiny bit smoother. So this part here is going to remain the bottom of the blue whale. And I might just go over the whole bottom of this area with my medium needle. And in my case, I like to just speed it up a bit with 2 needles, or if you have a needle felting pen, this would also speed it up. So I'm just going to do really small, gentle taps all the way along the whale, right from the bottom to the top. This is just going to smooth out that area, and it's going to be the width of all the way round halfway, all the way along. So I'll do that and I'll speed this part up. That's me, have finished just smoothing out that area. If you do happen to have any extra coral wool left, you can just take a really small amount, even if it's just pinching a little bit off the tufties of these fins here. And you can just spread that out between your fingers, pulling the fibres apart as well to make a little patch. And you can just patch over any area that really wasn't smoothing out with the gentle stabbing, and that will also smooth. I didn't need to use much there. That will also smooth out that area a little bit more. So I'll just really tap that down gently all over, and I'll speed this up. Okay, so now I've just tapped that really gently over the surface. You can see that's slightly smoother than before. So the way you're felting down to have a smooth surface is if you find a little bump that's sticking up, you tap that and it felts it down. And eventually, once you've gone over all those little bumps, it will start to smooth out. And this will be the underside of the whale. So now flipping over to the less smooth side, this is going to be the top of the whale where we're going to start adding our colour. And I've got this gorgeous, lovely mid-blue that I'm going to start attaching to the whale's body here. And I'm just going to do it a little bit at a time. So this entire area on the top of the whale is going to be covered. You can always just place a small piece on and then pull out the excess and just move that along so you've got a nice area covered there. Don't want it to be bulky, don't want to just stick that on like that. You just want to take off a small piece at a time, pulling the fibres apart and just building up the colour that way. And it attaches very easily just with your medium needle. I'm using 2 here just to speed that up for me. I'm just tapping really gently over the top. If I start stabbing that in, it's going to actually leave big stabby marks, which is not going to look great. So I'm just very gently tapping all over that area, and that will very easily then attach to the core wool on the body. And then I just continue to felt down the outside bits there. And what we're doing is going to cover the whole length of the top of the whale, right from the nose to the tail, but we're going to leave a line coming from where the mouth is over here. I'm going to make a line to show you just by twisting a piece of this wool, and that will help make a nice defined line over here. If I hold that down with my 2 fingers, my medium needle, I can just then stab that in. So that line is going to come all the way down to the tail on both sides. So I'm just going to continue to do that, and I'll speed this part up again. Just to add, when you're working down, you don't have to twist and roll the fibres to get that line. That was just a quick way of showing you what we're looking for at the nose end. You can always just lay it on there and then fold over the bottom of that felt there, holding that on with your fingers and then gently tapping along that fold. And that's a nice, easy way to do it without having the bulk of a twist there. Got this side done, I'm just going to flip it over, and just to make sure that I've really got that line coming down on the other side in the right place, I'm going to look along its length here and just position my finger where I want that to end. So I've made a fold with the felt there. Now I'm just going to double check it before I commit to that, and that's looking like it should be exactly halfway along the top and then white along the bottom. So now we've got the whole top part of the blue whale covered, and the bottom is still that white or cream colour. You can go along the line here with your medium or your large needle, and that just really helps define that line between the dark and the light. Also just gives it a little bit of definition as it makes a groove between those 2 sections. So I'm just going to do that all the way along. So now we've got that nice line coming all the way along. There is a small part of the line which isn't quite as straight as the rest, and I want things to come up from the bottom here, this white line, come up to about just under 1/3 of the way. This is about 1/3 here, so a little bit less than that. Around about here, just going to eyeball that rather than measure it, is where the eye is going to be. And this part, the line of the white comes slightly up towards the eye there. Now I've got an area where I know I need to just have that rise up a little bit this end. So I'm just going to use a little bit of my white, folding it over. So it's round about there. I'm going to have it come up a little bit. And then just pushing with the end of your needle, pushing your fibres to make that line come down into the other line you have already. Taking that down gradually, and then here on the other side also. Definitely easier with the white first, and I'll just add a tiny little fold of blue down here. And I'm just guiding it with my needle and my fingers to where I want it to go, and then tapping it in gently. Those lines nicely felted. I can work on a little bit of detail on the underside of this whale before we go on to attach the fins and the tail. So popping Mr. Whale on his back there. Now you don't need your felting mat for this if you don't want to. I'm going to continue using mine. Might make a little sunken bed for him in there. And you can either use your large or your medium needle for this. But what we're going to do is make some grooves coming from the nose of the whale, the nose end of the whale, all the way down, and then just kind of fading out and tapering off towards the end. I'm going to start by making a groove right in the middle there because that's just seems the easiest to me. And all I'm going to do is just do short but firm taps. And I'm going to do this in a line. I'm going to do it this way rather than this way, just because I work better going from left to right, and that will make the first groove. So lots of short but firm stabs, and if you want to, you can make a little dot to dot by doing a few dots or marks with your needle, just so you know exactly where you're going. You can even do a few this way. Might help give your brain a little bit more of an idea where you're going. So I might even go back here to that dot and then just start felting down, making a groove from one dot to the next, all the way up to the nose. I'm going to turn it around this way, making a few marks for myself. I'm going to start making that groove. We're just going to let it gradually fade out towards the end of the blue whale. So as you get to here, you're just felting less. You're just making even shorter stabs. So there's a small indication there of something happening, but nothing as deep as the groove on this side here. I'm just going to go back along all the way up to the nose. Okay, so now I'm going to go for the next one. I'm going to start doing lines above and below, and I'm going to continue to do that all the way right up to the line. Just to point out the way that these lines have ended up at my nose, they do sometimes have a little bit of a curve. Well, they definitely do have a curve here for that last line coming up. So although they're coming along this way, they're definitely having an up curve at the sides. of those lines, which is fine, that's how it's meant to look. And then just going for a straight line all the way down. Okay, so now I've finished getting those lines done underneath, and you can see they're a lot more distinct at this end where the nose and the top end of the whale is, and then just kind of fading out. And I have gone over this area, just the whole surface area of the tail, which helps both smooth out the lines and also just smooth out the appearance of that tail because it was rather bumpy and bulky. So your whale should be quite firm to squeeze. I could give it a really hard squeeze like this, but it's still quite nice and firm, so that makes it easier to work on. And now we've done the details there, we can move on to colouring our fins and our tail, and we'll attach them on next. So I'm going to start with my tail here. My tail is a little bit on the small side. I'd like it to be a little bit bigger. So what I'm going to do is just felt that on, but I'm going to make sure when I'm doing so I'm going to go over the lines as well. But first I'll attach it on this way so I can see where it's going. Just going to use my medium needle, or needles in my case, just to do a few stabs in. Now this will go through the blue and into the white core wool. But you might also see on the other side it coming right through, and you get little dots of blue and bits of that blue coming right through, and that's okay. I feel like that gives it a nice natural look, and it gives it a little bit of a blend between the cream and the blue. So I'm fine to do that. Just felting that through, making sure all of the bits are covered. I'm just having a little bit of guesswork there of where it's going. Very roughly. All the bits of cream covered. Now if your tail's the right size, what you could do is just fold in the ends there and then attach it this way in here. I'm going to fold my ends over onto the mat, which will just give the end or the edge of that tail a little bit more width. You can use your needles to guide those fibres, fold them in and down, and go back over the cream area. I'm going to guide the fibres in this way and down. Just going to take that off and add in a little bit more in the middle there. And you can see some of the white fibres coming through this side as well, but that's okay because it's quite nice to have a little bit of a blend between the two. So now I have that there. Just going to part those fibres in the middle. Bend that over. So I'm just pushing the fibres where they want to go, folding them in and down. Again, you could just fold them right over onto the core wool that you made earlier. For me, I'm just making up for that lack of size by making the side of the tail on the mat rather than over the core wool, which is a bit trickier. So you can just go and fold that right over onto the core wool if that is easier for you. Then I'm giving it a really good stab right through for it all to hold, which will stick to the mat at this place, but carefully taking that up. Okay, so you've got a nice little bit of blend there, nice big tail going on there. So I want to do the same on this side. This part here actually should have been left white, so I'm going to pull that off. It's a little bit too bulky here in the blue, so I'm just going to pull that off. Easily done. If not easily done, get these sharp scissors out. So yes, this needs to be coming into a white because this is going to be the underside of the whale there. So I'm just going to open out those blue bits. And if you have any extra coral wool, you can just do a little bit of a blend over here if you need to make sure it's coming into a nice cream colour where we're going to attach. But I really want that part to come in a little bit more. I'm really going to pinch that in there to have that come in nice and small. And we're going to felt that together. I'm just going to be pushing it on its side. It feels better to have those two come up together to get it right there on its side, and between my fingers I'm going to use my large green needle here. Right through to my table, careful of that. I'm going to felt along that area, and that will hold the fibres together so it's a bit more thin at the bottom of that tail coming in. You can do the other side too. So that's definitely thinned it this way. So now I'm just going to push it down on my mat here. Holding that this way, I'm going to go through this side, which will then flatten it out, and still got that nice thin part where it comes in the tail. Now I'm going to go along this way just to shape that tail that little bit more, using my large needle here just because it's quicker. Pointing it in this way. Be very careful with your hand and your fingers while you're doing this. But I'm just going to felt along a little groove, and that will push in to have that kind of top of a heart shape coming in, a V shape. A little bit more. And any part that's sticking up, I always just give that a little bit of felting down. So there we go. If you're very careful, you can just go over the edges of your tail, or you can trim them down with a pair of scissors. Now we've got our lovely wee tail. All we need to do is attach it on. If you part them like that, you could do a little bit of attaching on both sides. I'm going to pop that on here. Do the best you can, doesn't have to be perfect, as long as it's attached on, and we can rework the colours in a little bit. So I'm popping the white side onto the white fluffy bits there, and those blue fluffy bits over this way. Don't worry if some white comes through, it's fine, a little bit of blending. So either with a large or a medium needle, whichever feels like it's going to work best for you. You might find the large needle, if you've felted your whale really firmly, is just not going through at all. But I'm just doing short stabs, I'm not going all the way through, just enough to attach those fluffy bits of the blue onto the body. So that's the fluffy bits of the tail onto the body. And then underneath, flipping over, getting those bits. And yeah, it doesn't matter if those colours have blended a bit. Main thing is getting that attached on. We are going to be doing some blending anyway of our whale, just to make her or him extra special. So I'm just going back along between the tail and the body here along that line, making it nicely defined. I'm going back over the whole thing a few times just to make absolutely sure it's really nicely attached. And I'm not going to worry about those blends. If you don't like it and you do have a little bit of coral wool, you don't need much, you could even just steal a bit off of here on one of the fluffy ends. Just make a little patch if you like. And then just with a medium needle, just tap that over the area. nicely attached now. I'm not going to pull it too much, but that should work nicely. And now we're going to move on to the fins. So we've got our little fins here. Now I should have mentioned earlier, we're going to need two tiny bits of the cream colour at the end of this tutorial to make the eye. So if you haven't already got a little bit of core wool left over from other bits of the project, now's the time to just steal a little bit off there. You're not going to use much at all. In fact, that's probably enough. A little bit of a pinch there. Rolling that up between my fingers and my thumb, even licking your fingers and your thumb to help that process. You can make a tiny little whale eyeball from that. And we're going to need that later. So you're going to do that twice. Something similar like that. So we'll pop them aside. Now we're going to get on to colouring our fins. So exactly the same way as the tail, you're just going to, and because my fins are a good size, I'm just going to cover the shape I already have with my medium needle, tapping through to attach, making sure to go right to the ends, not leaving white at the ends. We're going to cover all the way over, just doing this very roughly at the moment, till I can't see any of that white. Make sure you have enough blue for both fins, so you might want to half that if you've only a little bit left. If you're short on the blue, then try and use one of the other colours to colour your fins something similar. So now I'm turning it over, just to see that it's come over the edges of that area. And I'm going to felt again, just all over this side, a little bit of tapping all over, get that smoothed out. And then over this side, I'm going to fold that right over onto the actual core wool, which you could have done on your tail had it been the right size. Mine was not, but at least you've got that technique of enlarging the shape if you so wish. If you have tiny little fins, you might want to do that here if you have enough blue. Or if you like the size you've got, you are just then folding over the blue, holding it onto your core and felting down. So that's our fin finish. We're going to do exactly the same with this side, and I'll just jump on forward. And magically this will appear, ta-ding, the same as the other one. So ta-da! All sort of blended in at the back just by felting it in and going through it on both sides. That just naturally happens, but it gives that nice sort of broken natural look, which I really love. And now we're just going to attach that onto our wheel. So I'm going to start with this one, I think. So we're going round about in the middle here, making sure this is the eye here where the wool comes up a little bit into that mountain or hill of white. So after that, we're going to be placing it here. I'm just going to check how big do you want that. Do you want it to be a small fin? Do you want it to be extra large fin? I'm going to go and attach those fibres here. It's going to be quite a large fin over this end, so I'm just holding that over the blue area. The bottom of the fin is going to be coming here, right where that line is. So first I'm going to attach this way with my medium needle through those blue fibres. I'm not stabbing too hard, just enough for those fibres to connect onto the wheel. Don't worry about bits of white there. I'm just going to get all the fluffy bits gently felted down just by tapping. Then I'm going to go through quite roughly here just to make sure that's attached. Not too many times, I don't want to distort the shape of the wheel. And then I'm going to bend it over here. Now I'm going to use my stronger needle, which is my large green needle, and go through that fold want to make really sure that's nicely attached through that area. I want that fold, that bend there, to come where that line is. So I'm just really pushing that down into position before I commit and felt that all the way through. So that should be it nicely attached now on both sides. And if you have any extra blue, you can just take a little bit off, don't need much, just to smooth out the appearance of where the fibres were connecting together. Just a little bit more here, I think. Honestly, not much at all. If you don't have that, that's fine. You might have some other colours anyway, which we're going to be adding to just help blend that area. I'm not too bothered about that white there just now. So just small short stabs, and that has blended that nicely. Then I'm going to do the same with the other side. And if you need to have that fin coming in a little bit narrower where it hits the body, you can go in this way a little bit. You can also go in this way if you choose. Not a necessity. This is just something I feel like, I don't want to do that. Okay, so it's got a little bit more of a curve coming in there. So same on the other side, same again. Just make sure when you're attaching it, it's in the same position and the same length as your other one. Now here I had rather a lot of white attached to the body there, so I'm just going to cover that up. If you don't have any blue left, you might be able to pinch a little bit off the back of your whale there, just to cover up any bits that you feel like, okay, that's a bit too much white going on in that area, especially since the eye is going to be placed very close to there, and that was almost looking like an eye in itself. One of those cool happy accidents, but we'll continue with the plan and get that a bit more blended in with the blue so that it can make its actual eye. I always do a little bit of re-smoothing and re-sculpting as I'm working along on something, because when you're attaching something or doing something to your sculpture, you're going to find other parts coming a bit more unhinged or a bit less smooth or a bit less firm. So I'll just like to go over the shape, making sure everything's nice and firm and tight, blended, and as smooth on the surface as can be. So I do tend to go over bits quite a lot with that in mind. But look at that, folks. Can really start to see it now coming together. Any little bumpy bits, I'm just going over that I can see. But now we've got the shape, the body, the fins, the tail. We've just got little details left to add, and then we can do some lovely, gorgeous blending on the top of our whale next. But first, we're going to move on to the eyes. Right folks, so now we're going to move on to some of the details of our lovely whale. So we're going to take out those little two balls that we made earlier with our core wool. And here they are here. So I'm going to be attaching one of them just above that little hill that we made in the core wool earlier on the bottom half. So around about here. So I'm just going to push that together into a ball and hold that in the area. I'm going to take one of my medium needles here and push that through the core wool a few times, and that should be enough to hold it. Continuing there with my medium needle, just going to go around the outside of that ball. shape going on there, like a little mound of white. But I have it around about roughly in a small mound there, and that's nicely attached on. Then we're going to make an eyeball with some dark colours, so whatever you have, if you have black candy or you have some nice dark blues. I've got all my nice mixes of colours here. I like to use a nice mix of colours to do some blends and some patterns afterwards. So I'm going to take some of this. This is quite a dark blue. I'm pulling some of that off there, licking my thumb and my fingers. I'm going to make a smaller little ball of felt. This is going to make the pupil to go here. So this is a dark blue I'm using, but you can use a black or a brown, just something dark to represent the pupil there of the eye. And I'm just very, very gently felting that in. And you can use either your medium needle or your red needle, which is the finest needle. Smallest needle, size 38. Just some gentle taps, and that gets that felted nicely on there. I'm going to make my pupil just slightly bigger there because I feel like it's got a little bit of a frightened look at the moment. Slightly larger pupil. And then what we're going to do is make the eyelid on the top and the eyelid on the bottom, so it's not, I have a little bit left of this blue wool, which is the same colour as the rest of them there. If you don't have any left, you could just pinch a little bit off his body somewhere, because you don't need much at all. Just going to take off a tiny bit here. And again, I'm just going to make a fold on my mat so I have a line to work with. And that line is going to go over just above the middle of that eye there. And I'm going to attach it on at the edges first, so at the left and the right. And then I don't want it to go right the way across like this. So I'm just going to, with the very tip of my needle, push that part up to try and make a little bit of an arch to have that go over the eyelid. In an arch, those little fluffy bits, I'm just gonna very quickly felt down. Now I'm gonna go over this part here to make a little groove where the top of the eyeball is, and this will make it look like we have an eyelid. Gives that a little bit more definition. I'm going to do the same again, taking off a tiny bit of the same blue there, folding it over my thumbnail there. I've got a nice line fold I can work with. I'm going to put that here underneath the eye, attach it on the right and on the left. So we've got it attached there. Turning it around just to work on it a bit easier here. Now I don't want to start felting these bits into the white there, so I'm being careful not to do that. So I'm just gently just pushing those excess fibres along that line that we created earlier. Use your finger to push them where you want to go, and then gently just tap them in. That's those fluffy bits sorted. And then working back here, we're going to go underneath the bottom eyelid to make a little groove right under the eye there. And go back around the eye to really just help define that whole eye area. And then a little bit along here as well, just to get that eyelid nicely firmly felted. And I'm also going to do what I did at the top and go along the line to push back that eye so that the eyelid is that little bit higher than the actual eyeball itself. Now I'm just going to go around the whole area of that eye, just to sink it in a little bit. And then we're going to do the same on the other side, and I try and place it in the same area. So I'm going to pop a needle right in the middle of that pupil there, so I can see where the eye is placed on the whale. Then I can put it in the same position as I'm looking down over the top of the whale and down, so it's in the same place as that needle there. And again, we're having it just above that hump, so looking here, I might need to bring that needle back a little bit. So around about here. That is where it's going to be placed. You can keep checking from time to time, folding up that eyeball to attach it right here. Okay, so now I've added in the second eye there. So it's in a similar position than this one. The thing I'm not so happy with is when I was working on these eyes, it really took down the height of the head there, and they made it look even closer together at the top. So I'm just showing you how to fix that if you have the resources to do that, and if the same thing happened to you, it might be good to know. So I'm just wanting to bring up the height of that head a little bit by taking some of that blue wool and folding it into a little bit of a long patch like this, like a long rectangle. And I'm just going to gently attach that onto my whale to bring up the height of the head a little bit. And that for me just makes it that little bit more appealing to look at. Now we're going to finish up with a little bit of decoration. So whatever colours you have handy, I like a mix of turquoises, different kinds of blues, even some violets and purples, even a little bit of pink. So just whatever you have handy, this is time to just add your own character to your whale. So I'm going to move on to that next and show you the colours that I'm going to use for this project. So I have here kind of like a mix of different colours of blues and violets and turquoises, and just these are just all my favourite colours. I've even got a little bit of this hand-dyed locks here, which I'm going to use just to make some pretty patterns on the top of the whale. So before I do that, I'm just going to try and put some blends in there, so whatever I choose, doesn't really matter. Here I've got some nice sort of violet, which I'm going to just peel off into a really thin layer. I might just put that randomly just all over my whale. And I might try, we've got some of this lighter blue here. Gives it a little bit of a highlight in the middle, which is nice. Then I might go in with some darker colours and put these. This is a really nice dark blue, violety blue really. So I'm going to pop this in places where I might find some shadows. I've got some turquoise as well. I can't help but want to use this because it's just such a gorgeous colour. I've just felt that with my medium needle all over, just to attach those lovely blended colours, and we'll give it a really nice just mix of those gorgeous ocean colours all together. And I'll speed this part up. Folks, and now I've coloured him all over and felted those lovely colours down. You may have noticed I've also done a little bit of eye surgery in this one. I had to shift it up slightly, which meant kind of pulling it off and then just shifting it back down and felting it in, and then just using what colours I had to try and remake and rebuild and do some reconstructive surgery over here just to make it a little bit more in the same position as the other one. But yet again, it's not perfect, and neither does it have to be, but I'm happy with it. And the patterns you can choose to do now is, or you could choose to leave him or her the way she is, but I'm going to choose to do a little bit of patterning with these lovely hand-dyed locks, which have got lovely ocean colours on them already. So I'm just going to separate some of them out. Try and keep some of those curls also, so we've got a little bit of a mix. I really want that to come all the way down and along the body, and I'm just going to felt that in just to give it a little bit of nice texture onto the whale with my medium needle. Really, I'm just using the tip of my needle just to place where I want it to go, and then some short little stabs. Especially with those delicate little curls there, you don't want to stab it too hard in. You want to keep that looking nice and nicely formed there. Some of the curls are a bit more fuzzy than the others, so it's fine. Just place it with the needle and with the fingers where you want it to go, and then gently tap that in. Also, if you want to, you could add some patterns in there. I'm going to make a little starfish over here, and the way I'm going to do it is with my large needle here. You're just going to mark out the shape of a starfish. I'm going to do the 5 points first to where I'm going. So it's going to be about this big, and you can see from the marks. And in between those 2 points, I'm going to find the point in between those 2 points and bring that in towards the middle. And that's where those 2 lines are going to come down to make that star shape, and there'll be 4 there. I'm actually going to go down to use my medium needle here because I was pulling in those fibres a little bit too far, and then that will distort the shape of the little star. So now I'm just joining up those dots by doing tiny little stabs to make a groove. And then down from the top down here. I'll just continue to do that and speed that part up. Star shape happening there. I'm just going to choose a colour to fill it up. So I think I'm going to go, I've got this lovely green turquoise colour here and I've not done too much with it. I'm going to go for that. I'm going to place it on there just a little bit at a time, don't need too much. With my medium needle, just tapping that in the middle of the star just to begin felting it on. And And I'm going to just pull bits aside so I can see the star underneath. I can see that is the point of my star there. So I'm going to pull the fibres of the turquoise in to that point there. And I'm going to pull it aside to see where the lines are on either side of that point, and just gently felt that point down. I'm going to do the same over here with this point. Pull it aside, I can see this is where I'm going to go. Pulling those fibres with the tip of my needle and then felting them in. Continue to do that. And I'm doing very gentle, small little stabs to attach it in over that area. And gently down so I can see a bit more of what's happening. So I'm just going to continue doing that, going all the way around, pushing those fibres into that star shape and gently felting it over this way, down, and the last one over here. Pulling this part in here with my needle and down. So you can really use the tip of your needle, if you're very careful not to break it, to push the fibres where you want them to go and then begin felting them in. I'm going to go around the outside and over the star just to really make that shape a bit more distinct. You could even add to the outside with some darker colours. Here I've got this nice really dark purpley blue. And if you want to, you could just place that over, guide your fibres, we want them to go in this case, just the outside of that star. Pushing them in there. And you can see that contrast there is helping it to stand out that little bit more. Again, I've just got a tiny little wispy bit there. Push it into the side, felting it along those lines by pushing the fibres in, tip of my needle. And this takes practice, guys. If you've never done this before, it will be slightly tricky. Have a go. Something you get better at as you practice with it. It didn't turn out right. Don't worry about it. I think I've already lost a bit there, but pulling those fibres aside, I can still see that green turquoise under there. Continue to felt. You can always pull bits off and try again. But it does not have to be perfect, and there I have a little bit of a general star shape, which is lovely. Just bringing the felt around that star down a bit, because it feels like that whole area is now dipping in. There we go, and it might come back out. So I can continue adding there. I found this tiny little bit of pink there. Don't know where that came from, but I like it. So if you have any different colours that might go, pinks will go with your purples, and then you've got blues and greens going together. Just going to stick that in there because it's something different. Make little dots on the starfish. You can make little barnacles all the way down if you wanted to, with a different colour. You could use some of your white core to make little barnacles as well. Whatever you've got handy, you can make little star shapes, little round circles, felt them in, decorate your little whale. Even beads would be a lovely thing to sew into him or her, just to make this a little bit more of a magical whale, fantasy whale. I've got some nice little bits of locks here I've just found, so I'm going to attach them on. There we have it. Oh, and found a little bit of some core, so I'm going to use that since it was there. Make a little ball. Do some decorative little barnacles or whatever down the body. Another one here. Fine things tend to work in groups of 3s as well. So when I'm attaching that, I'm just going around the outside rather than over the whole thing, which gives it a little bit more of a 3D look. And I'll do one more to make it into a 3. And of course you can just fuss over that as long as you like. And there we have our beautiful needle felted fantasy whale, or blue whale. And here's another one that I made earlier. Similar colours and patterns, slightly different. This is one that I filmed down at the beach at the beginning of this tutorial. So now they can be a family of whales. I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you'd like to try any of my other tutorials or my kits, you can find more on my website at www.littleblueartworks.com. I also have a monthly subscription box which you can join, and you get a mystery project sent to your door every month with something new. Or you can look into some online workshops which I'll be opening in 2021, so you can come and felt along in a class online in the comfort of your own home. Don't forget to join us in my Little Blue Felting group on Facebook, and you can also follow me on Instagram, and some tutorials also found on YouTube. Thanks for watching!